Hello there, Millennium Alliance listeners. Welcome back to another episode of the Millennium Live podcast. My name is Connor Toohey. I am executive producer and host of the Millennium Live podcast series, and we got a great episode with one of our technology partners. And today we're going to be all talking about AI-powered ITOps and a partner who can automatically identify actionable alerts, proactively prevent incidents, and ensure the highest service availability. I want to welcome to the podcast today Jason Walker. He is the Chief Technology Officer at the partner we're talking about, BigPanda, and has firsthand experience running large IT operation departments himself. He started his career as a United States Marine Corps helicopter pilot and has come this way to become the CIO of BigPanda. Jason really brings skill, professionalism to really any situation, regardless of scale, speed, and complexity. Jason is driven to help customers accelerate their AIOps journeys by leveraging BigPanda's practical applications to enhance operations, performance, and ignite that transformative growth that we're going to be talking about today. He previously served as field CTO and then chief customer officer for BigPanda. So he's been here for a few years and spent the previous 10 years at Activision-Blizzard, leading Blizzard's IT operations transformation and to support multi-product, always online global gaming services with an AIOps-driven centralized OpsCenter. So he has a lot of experience, and I'm really excited to get your perspective, Jason, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Millennium Live. I know you're a busy guy, so thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Connor. That was the lengthiest introduction I think I've ever gotten, and the rosiest too. So great to be here, and I hope I can answer your questions today.
Of course. Well, let's dive in. We're going to be talking generative AI, which shows really incredible promise, and particularly when it comes to explaining complex terms in natural language. I want to dive into all of this and how AI can help IT ops teams that are really struggling out there, specifically with the flood of incidents that really demand their attention. So, Jason, I want to give you the opportunity to give us a brief background about BigPanda and perhaps why you decided to really, as a technologist yourself, join the company.
I joined BigPanda after using BigPanda. So I was in traditional IT ops, and we were very ITIL focused, which is kind of the IT service management that is the predominant way of running these massive online services that organizations, on average, they have about 1,100 of them, and they use a whole ton of systems to monitor them. So we tried to do that ourselves manually through ticket-based processes and with event management at its core, bring in the events, try to provide enough information about it, and then turn it into a ticket, get it to where it needs to go, get it resolved. And we were doing that to the tune of about 1,500 per week, 1,500 incidents. And that's a lot for a small team. It was, Activision-Blizzard, it's not a huge company. It's not hundreds of thousands. So we were doing that, and the whole goal is service availability. So you have to identify the incidents that are really important and going to affect, in our case, players. And they're a very demanding and vocal audience. Whenever you let them down and the game crashes, they let you know about it right away. So we struggled with that on the team for a long time, and we looked for other solutions, something other than traditional ticket-based ITIL, ITSM processes. And we found AIOps. And in the course of evaluating different vendors, BigPanda was the one that we selected. And I worked with them as a customer for about a year before I said, you know what, this is some really compelling technology and solves a big problem that I don't think Activision-Blizzard is alone in trying to solve. And so I was lucky enough, Asaf Resnick, our founder, gave me the opportunity to come over as field CTO. Then I slowly learned that, yes, every organization is struggling with this. They all got left behind in the digital transformation. And there's, DevOps and SRE and IT ops out there that is all confronted with, hey, you have to maintain these services. And doing that is very, very difficult with the tools and the strategy that you have right now.
Right. And I want to dive into that too. And that's a great story. It sounds like a full circle story. So
Yeah, love
I
those.
I like hearing those. And I want to dive in a little bit to the current state of generative AI and particularly why generative AI is becoming a necessary tool, and especially to make incident response faster and more accurate and more consistent than humans can really achieve alone, and bringing those IT ops teams elsewhere in the organization.
Yeah. So applying like data science and machine learning to large data sets of incoming events, incoming alerts, that's not anything new. People have been trying to do that for a long time. And the challenge has always been, hey, you have to develop a model and train that model on a data set. And that takes a long time and some real data scientists and a whole lot of expertise. And it's usually only useful in a certain lane, like an infrastructure provider. All of the logs and metrics and events coming from a specific vendor, you can deal with that very well with a single algorithm. Your typical organization will have 21 different systems to observe all of their different services, all of their different applications, and they'll have all sorts of different manufacturers when it comes to hardware, when it comes to software, what have you. There's just a real fragmentation across the input end to those machine learning algorithms. And that's really where traditional AI kind of just, it stalled out for about a decade there. And it was either really expensive to do and is organization specific, or it was ineffective and it was just all hype. And generative AI came along, and it, rather than supervised learning or unsupervised learning or deep learning or something like that, it brought something called transfer learning, which is, you know, the guys at OpenAI and at Google and everywhere else, they trained their GPTs on, and large language models, LLMs, on the internet and everything the internet has ever seen. And they did, you know, years of tuning on that, but they basically made it able to answer any question and do it in a conversational format. And that included structured data, like, you know, what you would consider machine data, and unstructured data, pure text. And they did it by, you know, vectorization and semantics, cosine similarity, some really powerful baseline technology. But that data set was huge. And so that gave it the ability to do transfer learning, which is, I understand generally how IT works. If you go to your typical GPT, it knows everything that's ever been written about IT operations. And I can transfer that to interpreting something like your events, your alerts, your incident data, your change data. And so that transfer learning really increased the speed of developing a useful feature that is AI based and can process things very, very quickly and easily, and most importantly, effectively. So that really opened up the door to a whole bunch of features within ITOps. And if you think of that alert or event to incident to resolution workflow, that whole thing now, all of the data in there is now available to these models for whatever you want to use it for. And that's a pretty, you know, broad description, but in a nutshell, that's how I think generative AI has come on the scene and really changed the game.
So before I kind of dive into perhaps some best ways to apply this and get involved, I'm curious, Jason. You know, from what you've seen out there, what is really the true importance of clean, enriched data for organizations to achieve reliable results?
Yeah. So whenever you're trying to solve a problem with a large service, when a big IT service, let's say an e-commerce system, you need context. If you have an e-commerce system, you maybe have country-specific payment providers. You have all of the mobile interface, the web interface. You have all of the infrastructure underneath it. You have all these attributes of that service and the nuances that are specific to different end users of that or different manifestations of that service. And your basic alert payload is, hey, here's the node, here's the condition that failed, and it's about 6 lines long. It doesn't give you any of that context. And so everybody's always been keeping that context in their head. And that's what made the jobs of ITOps and SRE and everybody else super difficult. With enrichment data, with, let's say, the data that you've contained in a CMDB or in an entity inventory or in an IT asset management inventory, if you have that, or a service map, a service diagram, if you have that at your fingertips, you now have the context you need to resolve that incident and to properly structure your response to it. So, hey, I know that it is my e-commerce system. I also know that it's in Argentina, and I know that Argentina uses these 2 specific payment providers, and I know right now that one of them sent me an email describing the maintenance that he was doing on his payment provider services, and that might be the reason I have this alert right now. So connecting those dots is actually very, very difficult without enrichment data. And enrichment data is everywhere, but it's always been really, really hard to get into the workflow of ITSM and ITIL. So that's why it's really important, and that's how useful it is in actually resolving incidents.
Yeah. Oh, that's well said, Jason. Thank you. I want to get into some of the best ways to really apply AI to IT operations in order for organizations to get real value. And, I know a big approach for BigPanda is to evolve from this reactive to a proactive operations strategy. So, could you tell us a little bit, some of the ways to best apply AI to IT ops?
So the first place I'd apply AI is in configuring a platform to kind of get actionable incidents into operators' hands. And that means identifying out of all that observability, what is actionable and what is not. And you can do that with a simple AI-based analysis of your historical data. So that's a huge data set of all the incidents you've ever run, where they started at, like what the alert was that started them off, and what happened with them. Did they get resolved? Did they get resolved with a specific run book, with some action, or were they associated with a change and just kind of symptomatic noise that you don't really need to pay attention to? If you first get rid of all the reasons that alerts fire, because they're just like smoke alarms, whether you're cooking fajitas or the living room is on fire, that alert is going to go off. And a lot of times it turns out you're cooking fajitas. and in large organizations, they respond to a lot of alerts like that. And I've seen people bulk close 1,000 incidents all at once because they know, oh, the network team is doing a security update, and that's going to cause all this symptomatic alerting. So first off, you use AI to detect the noise and get rid of it. That leaves a much thinner stream of actionable incidents that you then use AI to do that enrichment and do that contextualization. And that's a huge facet of what AIOps does, is it brings together all the necessary data from your change systems, from your topology systems, and from your historical systems to say, here's this incident, here's what we know about the elements involved, here's what changes were going on in proximity to it, and here's what you did the last 50 times this fired. You ran this run book, or you assigned it to this team, or you combined it with these other alerts that also fired at the same time. And then you resolved it by looking at these systems and restarting or cleaning the disk or destroying the containers and reinstantiating them. Like there's any number of remediations possible, but AI can really give you that context. And I think the core new application with generative AI is that all of the unstructured data in an organization, think about your Confluence documents or your knowledge base, or your knowledge management systems, or all of the run books you've ever written, or all the postmortems you've ever done for those major incidents that hit you really hard. Those are now all available to a GPT or an LLM to analyze and learn from, and then reason with and return responses about. So it can consult all of that an LLM can consult all of those unstructured data sets as well as the structured ones. So if I send an LLM a nice alert payload with all of the enriched tags that I have that describe it, I can say, hey, can you please speculate on the root cause of this incident and tell me what happened here? You can, and it'll give you a nice, usually very correct explanation of what it thinks is happening based on not just what you give it in terms of the payload, but also what it knows from knowing most of the internet prior to 2021. So that's a huge benefit for the operator, and a very like easy application. Like you can actually, that's not very hard to deliver for a platform like ours, which is ingesting all that observability data, enriching it, and then capturing it in incidents that we can then do whatever we need to. We can send it to a ticketing system, send it to a chat system, send it to an auto remediation system like Ansible, and it very quickly, that all those manual steps are now automated. And of course, the traditional benefits of automation are there: speed and absolute consistency, which humans are pretty fast and pretty consistent, but they don't really hold a candle to your typical machine.
Yeah, of course. And I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk, give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about BigPanda. I mean, I would ask you for a case study, but you're a great case study. You were a customer and then decided to join BigPanda yourself. So obviously it's a couple of things that you've mentioned, Jason, about machine learning and how it's certainly helped with the scale of IT alerts, and sort of how that's how BigPanda was founded. I want to talk about a report that came out. This is the Forrester Wave Process-Centric AI for IT Operations, their Q2 2023 report. And it's a really, for our members and our CIO members, it's a report that highlights the essential criteria and use cases for process-centric AI ops vendors and their scoring. And I want to ask you, Jason, of all people, BigPanda tied for second highest score in that strategy category. So really, there's some amazing work being done at BigPanda. And what makes BigPanda such a strong performer and perhaps a reliable solution provider?
So yeah, BigPanda did pretty well in that analysis, and I think it was the process-centric AI ops Forrester Wave, which is really important because process is at the heart of what BigPanda does, and that's really the BigPanda approach is very pragmatic. It recognizes the fact that organizations have many applications and architectures. Everything from the most legacy, like mainframes, they're still out there, to full cloud native services. And then they have all sorts of different systems to observe those, and all sorts of different change systems, and many teams operating in the same space, trying to keep these services running. And that fragmentation is something that BigPanda accommodates from the ground up. Like BigPanda, or I guess we now, BigPanda is agnostic to, like, if you can send us an incoming payload, we will ingest it and run it through all of the traditional processes that ITSM has done, and we'll do it instantly. And so we're kind of all source observability. We'll bring it all in. And so we're a big vacuum cleaner for that data, and as well as your topology data and all of your change data as well. And then we do a very consistent job of explaining what we do with it from there, which a lot of black box solutions don't do a great job of describing. Hey, I am going to enrich these alerts with this information. Here is what that looks like. And then here is where it's going to go in terms of routing to a specific team or a tool or service, or all three on the outbound side. And so what we actually did at BigPanda, and what works so well, is we use AI to augment the operator. We don't try to replace them. And that includes the person who configures that whole tool chain, from the monitoring systems on the one end to the outbound ticketing, chat, remediation, notification, paging, all those different systems on the outbound end. And so we put them in the driver's seat, and the AI makes suggestions around various things and provides nice modular features like automated incident analysis to say, here's what we think is going on. But of course, human judgment and being what it is, we're going to put it in your hands to actually decide what to do. And I think the reason Forrester really liked our response is because it accommodates the organizational change that every organization is going through right now. There's a reason SRE and DevOps grew up out of ITIL and ITSM, and it was out of a lot of frustration with bureaucracy. And there's a reason that this isn't a solved problem that a single tool can do, because it's really hard to convert your entire company to one monitoring solution or one orchestration system or one change system. That's actually, and it's not very advantageous. You then have this monolith that you have to feed, and you're kind of locked into it unless you want to undertake the organizational change or switch. So BigPanda is a nice connector of all the existing tools. We don't displace anybody. And we're very practical about what we do for the people that have to run these services, that have to keep them running day in, day out, and deal with all the noise and all the great signal that the inbound systems provide.
Yeah, it's clear that BigPanda is helping accelerate digital transformation and the innovation for enterprises out there and transforming the digital enterprise. Jason, I know you're a busy guy, so I wanna wrap this interview up with a question centered more on the future and what the future holds, and perhaps an open-ended question about generative AI and maybe some of the work that is being done at BigPanda and some of the innovations that are going on there for the future. Well, as a technologist, what do you see what technology and maybe more specifically AI can really bring to organizations of the future and beyond?
That is a blue sky question, if ever there was one. I think I'll do my best to try to answer that. I think IT operations is in a state of transformation, and we see a lot of companies embracing SRE. And so that I start with that organizational change and say, hey, they're leveling up and they're using data and AI and automation a lot more than manual processes. And I really see that trend continuing. And generative AI is going to accelerate that. There's going to be an augmentation of the human in every field, in every domain. Like I read a lot. I was the legal profession right now, and like tax preparation, they are considering how to use generative AI. And they've been really clear in both cases. There will be, in the future, there will be lawyers who use generative AI to help them do their job better, and there will be failed lawyers that are using that. And I think that's true in a lot of categories. And IT operations, SRE, they're no exception. I think organizations that embrace it will see massive efficiencies generated because, like I said, all that unstructured data that people spend so much time writing about these services, applications, the infrastructure, how it runs, how to fix it, that's all available now. And it's at your fingertips whenever you need it. You just have to transition from those very manual ticket-based processes to something much more automated and much more data friendly. And that involves, the crucial obstacle that we'll have to overcome over the next 1 to, I would say, 10 years probably to hit those last few companies is trust in the system. And when I say trust, I mean the appropriate level of trust, which is it's really interesting. People approach AI from either I don't believe in it or I completely believe in it. That's usually their kind of ground floor. And after using it for a while, you get the same thing that you get with a person, and that's an appropriate level of trust. If I have a software engineer with a certain amount of capability and he builds features for BigPanda, I get to know him and his capabilities, or her, and understand what they're capable of. I have an appropriate level of trust. I wouldn't give them a problem that is 5 times harder than anything they've ever seen, and I wouldn't give them something trivial either. And I would know when they're outside of their bounds in terms of what they're capable of. Like, they're talking about it, and they're considering it, but this isn't their area of expertise. I get that with a person. I think that's what's going to happen with generative AI is people will get an appropriate level of trust in the things that it's good at and what you've trained it on, and the things where, hey, it is transparently saying, hey, I am no expert in this subject. And most of the models do some version of that. I don't know a lot about this, but here's what I do know. That's a really powerful thing, and a partner to have with you, a co-pilot, alongside you for your day-to-day work. And I think that's where, once we get that appropriate level of trust, now all of a sudden it becomes a tool just like every other tool that has automated tasks and made things run better in general. Generative AI is going to do that, I think, for ITOps, for SRE, and definitely for all software development. That it already is in a lot of places, because software developers know a lot about, they're the ones who kind of invented this stuff. They're moving very quickly in that space right now. I would say what that means for people is they're able to do more. Everybody talks about the kind of automation apocalypse, the AI apocalypse. Actually, it's just an exoskeleton that supercharges your typical ITOps individual or SRE. They're going to be able to do so much more easily and so much more consistently, that all those manual frictions are going to fall by the wayside. And the thing I'm hopeful for is the elimination of bureaucracy that accompanies that. There is so much bureaucracy in traditional large organization IT service management, and I watch just personally at my last company, I watched people just struggle with that day in, day out. And I'm very, very hopeful that generative AI and all the ways that you apply it really cut all of that red tape out of the system as people learn to use it appropriately, and keep people in the critical decision-making positions I need to decide what is most important to do right now. And that's a human in the loop is definitely an aspect that I expect to continue for all the critical decisions that people really are necessary in those systems.
Well, for an open-ended blue sky question, Jason, that was a beautiful response, and I think it's worth noting too that all the talk around AI these days, it's interesting how it's we're not the only ones talking about it anymore, so that's a good thing. And I want to thank you for joining the podcast and talking about BigPanda, and when you want to streamline incident management across dozens of monitoring tools, BigPanda is the way to go. Greater visibility, automation, and insight to keep your IT environments running more smoothly and cost effectively. Specifically to our CIO members, I want to mention we have the Transformation Assembly coming up in August at the Ritz-Carlton in New Orleans. We also have one later this fall, November 1st and 2nd, down at the Biltmore in Miami. I want to thank our guest today, Jason Walker. Jason, it was great to chat with you today and learn more about this type of technology. And can't wait to see what goes on in the future and what the future holds for generative AI.
I'm with you. Thanks a lot, Connor. Great talking to you.